You're just joining us, my name is Susan Pulliam. I'm the Senior Director for Student Assignment here for Wake County Public Schools. And I'm here to share with you some information related to the Southeast area, Eastern area, and Northern areas related to our current proposed first draft of an enrollment plan for the 23-24 school year. As context, we started this presentation in September by presenting to our Board of Education, and I believe one of our board members has actually just joined us. Raleigh?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say that our board member, Monica Johnson-Hostler, just joined us as well.
Good evening. So as I was mentioning, in September on the 20th, we presented to the board work session our first draft of the 23-24 enrollment proposal. And with no new schools opening this year, the proposal for this year focuses on operational efficiency in the areas of capped and overcrowded schools, as well as underutilized schools, and also looking for opportunities to support transportation efficiency throughout the district. So just again, as a reminder, today's session is going to focus just on the portions of the proposal that are related to Southeast Raleigh, the Eastern area, and Northeastern area of the county. If toward the end of the session we have time and some of you have questions about other areas of the enrollment plan, we can look at those as well. But the core focus for today will make sure that we answer questions and share information specific to this area first. And so how are we going to get questions from you? So throughout the session, you are welcome to log into our ThoughtExchange. The link is posted here, and I believe we're going to post that information in the chat as well, so you can just copy and paste it into your browser. The ThoughtExchange is our official capture method for this year's Draft 1 comments. What we'd like for you to do is to log into the ThoughtExchange and then use hashtag session2 to indicate that you're participating in today's session. That way we can see those comments separated from general comments that might be being posted at the same time. That's one way that you can submit a question or a comment to us that you'd like for us to respond to later in the session. Also, you can use the chat feature that's part of the WebEx tool. Just know that if you use the chat feature, we'll be happy to answer those questions in the session, but those questions may not make it into the final data set for the board. So if you want to post it in both locations, you can, or just trust that we'll understand that the question came up here too. That's fine. So we'll take your questions and your comments in either method. Just know that we want to really encourage you to use the ThoughtExchange, since that will be the way that we get feedback back to the board later on next month. Are there any questions on how to access either of these two options?
Susan, I wanted to interrupt real quick and say
Certainly.
that Mark Savage, our assistant superintendent, has also joined.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to have so many representatives joining us today. Well, let's begin. As was shared in the video that we showed at the beginning of the session, and some of you may have logged in a little bit late, so that's okay. There are 4 core areas that our student assignment policy, Board Policy 4150, guides us to focus on as we're developing enrollment plans each year. Student achievement is one area, and I can argue that that's an overarching theme that we're always looking at for all of our school assignments. And then blended and sort of mixed in with that are the other pillars of stability, proximity, and operational efficiency. You'll often hear us say that no one of these pillars is more important than the others, but we look at them as a group, kind of as the graphic indicates, to try to help make sure that we have balanced schools, that we're efficiently utilizing the facilities that we do have, and that we're looking for ways to optimize transportation efficiency as well, all while maintaining our goals related to student achievement. During the presentation to the board in September, we did share a few updates that sort of helped to set a foundation for what recommendations were coming forward. Then we also shared those recommendations. So I'm going to walk you through a few of those updates so that you can have a little bit of a perspective as to how we came to the recommendations that we did propose in this first draft. And then when we get to the enrollment plan recommendation section, again, we'll be focusing on the recommendations specific to the Southeast Raleigh area, the eastern area of the county, and the northeastern area of the county. Toward the end of the presentation, we'll go over some next steps. I'll remind you how to access those question areas, and then we'll open it up for questions here tonight. So for context, we have actually used the ThoughtExchange before. In June, between the 10th and the 29th, we opened up a general ThoughtExchange asking parents and families and community members, what are the most important factors for a school to be a good fit for your family? We had wonderful participation in this first thought exchange. We had, as you can see, over 2,800 total participants. We gathered over 2,500 thoughts. And the star ratings, you'll see 56,000 or a little over 56,000 star ratings. If you've not used Thought Exchange yet, the way it works is that when you log in, you're presented with the question and a little bit of background information, and then you're asked to respond to the question. It's almost like a virtual Post-it note or a sticky note. And so you add a thought. I like this, or I think that academic quality is important. I think that being close to home is important, something like that. And that would be what you would post. And then once you've posted a few of your thoughts, then you're encouraged to go in and rate everybody else's thoughts. And what will happen is you get a random shuffling of the thoughts that have already been posted, and you go through and rank them with a 1 to 5 star rating. 1 meaning you don't really agree with it that much, or it's not something that is meaningful to you, and 5 being, oh, this is really meaningful to my family, or this is, I really feel supportive of this statement. So that way, not only are you posting your comments, you're seeing what other people in the community are saying. If during that process you think, oh, that makes me think of something else I want to share, then you can stop, post a new comment, that sort of thing. It's a very dynamic process. When you get done rating maybe 20 or 30 thoughts, and you're sort of like, okay, I feel like I've done my job. I've given some ratings to some thoughts. You also can then explore the entire thought exchange and see all the different thoughts that people have posted throughout the entire process. So the current thought exchange that we're running opened on September 20th and is specific to the current draft of the enrollment plan. But what we're seeing here is the results of that very first thought exchange. So you'll notice that we had a large percent of people participating identified as parents, a handful identified themselves as students. It's possible that we had someone who was both a parent and a staff member, so they selected both of those options to identify themselves. What you see here then is a graphic that demonstrates, based on those star ratings, thoughts that contain the words safety or safe or caring or quality or staff or communication received a lot of energy, meaning a lot of high star ratings, 4 and 5 star ratings. So that lets us know that these words as keywords are really important to families when choosing a school. But more importantly, we were also able to organize the thoughts into themes. And so what you'll see, and I know it's hard to tell, so I'll read a few of these to you. The two here on the far left represent quality staff and safety. And the overall rating for thoughts in these two categories was a 4.2, meaning these were the most highly rated thoughts, thoughts describing a quality staff, quality leadership, high quality teachers, that sort of thing. And then having a safe environment, the student feeling safe on campus, the student feeling welcome on campus. The next sort of highest rated areas were education quality, very similar to that staff quality, and good communication. And those had an average rating of about 4.1. As we continue on in the ratings, these were sort of the top 10 themes that came out. Community, proximity, and stability all came in with an average rating of about a 4.0 star rating. Special education came in about a 3.8. Calendar continuity and diversity came in at about a 3.7. And then you can see we have a bar over here with miscellaneous that just represents all of those comments that either didn't have an over 3.5 star rating or were different from, didn't neatly fit into one of these categories. But overall, what we could tell was that our community really likes the idea of having a high quality education and high quality staff. And generally, there's a lot of energy around the ideas about community and proximity and stability of assignment. I can honestly say those aren't surprising to me. As a parent, making sure that your student is at a high quality school with high quality teachers is always of prime importance. Um, and so what we did is we used this information to take it one step further. So that's an interesting idea. We get some information and some thoughts, but then we worked with our data research and accountability department and said, can we dig in a little bit deeper as to what families mean when they say quality staff or quality education? And how exactly it is that proximity is so important. What makes proximity so important for families? And so we were able to hold 3 separate focus groups, all asked the same questions. We had anywhere between 6 and 10 participants in each of those focus groups for a total of 23 total parent participants. And so we do need to be cautious. That's not a very large number, so we've got to be careful not to overgeneralize the results of the focus groups, but they certainly did give us the opportunity to have meaningful dialogue with parents and to dig deeper into these questions. And we did come away with 4 key takeaways. And those key takeaways are clear communication regarding the goals of student assignment, how it is that year-round schools work, why assignment decisions are made, being able to clearly communicate those decisions and the process that goes behind the decision making is really critical to families, which sort of generates these types of public engagement sessions. We also had an interesting conversation with these groups about the year-round calendar and proximity and facility size and capacity and utilization. And we had an interesting conversation where, for these particular parents, for these particular participants, the idea of changing a school from traditional to multi-track year-round seemed a little bit more attractive, let's say, than capping a student out of an overcrowded school or perhaps reassigning the students out of the school. So it's an interesting conversation point. Again, small group, we do need to dig deeper into this, but it was an interesting point that came out of this particular set of focus groups. When we dug into the concept about proximate schools and why proximity is so important, we discovered that it's really about being involved in the school, that the closer the school is to your home, the easier it is to participate in on-campus activities. And there's a perception that that then can lead to more positive impacts for student achievement for students in those families. And then, of course, the fourth key takeaway, which again, not really a surprise, but having strong, educated teachers that are really there and well supported is a really significant factor in a family's perception of what makes a high quality school. So using that information and moving forward, we thought we needed to have some more public engagement sessions. And so we started with that September 20th launch of our website, and the Thought Exchange opened up on that same day as well. The Thought Exchange will stay open through October 7th. So even after today, if you have additional ideas or thoughts, or if you want to share the link with family and friends, we'll continue collecting those input points from families and community members through the 7th. And then we're having our actual virtual information sessions, which you're a part of today. So as you can see, you're in our second information session focusing on the Southeast Raleigh, Eastern and Northeastern areas. We'll have two more information sessions next week focusing on the Southeastern and Southern areas for the one on Wednesday, and then the Southwestern and Western areas for the one on Thursday. Again, we're going to focus on this area for today's conversation. And if we have time toward the end of the session, if you have questions about some of the other areas, we certainly can address those today as well. Another piece of information that we shared with our Board of Education on September 20th was just a reminder about the schools that are capped. And for those of you that may not be familiar with that term, what that means is that the school is experiencing such severe crowding that it is possible that a new family that moves into the area that comes to register might not have a seat available for them in the school and be assigned to what we call an overflow school. So it's a somewhat proximate nearby school where we would provide bus transportation. But unfortunately for many of these schools, they've hit that cap number. And so if a new family moves in during the school year, they may not be able to go to that school. And so that's one way that we deal with the crowded schools, but it's certainly not our favorite. We do know that it creates a lot of instability for those new families. And certainly that level of crowding at a school isn't something we like to sustain long term. One more piece of information that we did go over with the board before talking about the proposal for this year was what we do know about what's coming up in the capital improvement plan, meaning which new schools are likely to open in the next couple of years so that we can be mindful that any recommendations we make for this enrollment plan aren't then impacted again with the opening of a school in a future year. So you'll see in orange schools that have recently opened. So Willow Spring High School opened in 21-22. This school year, we had 3 schools open: Barton Pond Elementary, Apex Friendship Elementary, and Herbert Akins Road Middle School. And then coming in 24-25, so not this coming school year of 23-24, but the next, so basically 2 years out, we are projected to have Woods Creek Elementary School open. The building itself will be ready and open sooner than that and will be used by Baucom Elementary as a site for what we call swing space. So Baucom Elementary students will go to that school for a short time, while their school is being renovated. Once their school is completed with renovations, they'll go back to their main school site, and then in 24-25, we're projecting that Woods Creek will be able to open as its own independent school. And then in 25-26, you can see a number of schools that are opening in the district projected to open. We have Hilltop Needmore Elementary, Rex Road Elementary, Bowling Road Elementary, Felton Grove High School, that's in the Holly Springs area, Pleasant Plains Elementary, and Parkside Middle School, which will also have some space for the new Wake Early College of Information and Biotechnology, Informatics and Biotechnology. And then in a couple of years after that, in 27, 28, we're projecting to open another high school in the Morrisville area. It has yet to be named. And so that's projected to open in 27, 28. We do caution everyone that with current market volatility, it is possible for some of these schedules to shift. But for right now, these are the projections that we're working with in terms of target open dates. So you'll see in some portions of the county that our recommendations are being made knowing that these particular schools will be opening. And so we don't necessarily want to move families this year and then potentially have them be impacted when these new schools open a couple of years later. So let's dig into it. The enrollment plan recommendations for this particular region we'll talk about in just a moment, but first let's just give you a quick overview. So at the elementary level, we're recommending all of these little colored areas or colored in areas that there be some changes for the base assignment for those schools. And so you can see here a list of schools that might be sending students to a different school, and then the schools that might be receiving new students from one of those existing schools. Here you see an overview at the middle school level of which schools might be impacted. Again, you can see these sort of colored in areas, acknowledging that there are some areas that might have some impacts, the sending schools that might be impacted, as well as the receiving schools. And then at the high school level, a handful of recommendations. We'll talk about some of the ones here in the Southeast Raleigh area, and then the ones over here in the West we'll talk about next week. Before we go into the specific recommendations for this area, we did want to sort of preempt the conversation with recognizing that no new schools are opening and that the large majority of the recommendations being made are based on relieving some crowding and relieving some transportation concerns. We did want to go ahead and propose some very generous stability rules for this year only. So I do have to put a big asterisk behind that to make sure that we understand that in a year when we're opening new schools, we might not be able to be this generous. But because this particular plan for this particular year doesn't involve the opening of any new schools, we're recommending that if a student and the family is impacted by one of these base assignment changes, that if they would like to stay at the school they're currently attending, we would be able to approve those requests. We're calling those stability transfers. The downside is that we wouldn't be able to provide transportation. However, if the families have a way to carpool and get to the school on their own, then they'd be welcome to stay and finish out their schooling at that particular school. So if it's a second grader, they could stay through fifth grade. If it's a fourth grader, they could stay through fifth grade, etc. In addition, to add to those sort of generous stability rules, we are recommending that any rising kindergarten, sixth, or ninth grade siblings who would be able to join their older sibling at one of the affected schools be allowed to do so for this first year. If all of this gets approved as recommended in our October 18th meeting to the board, we will go ahead and give a little bit more specific details about how we'll individually contact families that would be impacted so that they'll know specifically how to access these rules and be able to make these requests a little early. Our goal is actually to try to allow families to be able to make these requests before the end of December so they can feel really confident that this is taken care of and that they can move forward in the spring semester without having to worry about it. So let's jump in. Again, Southeast Raleigh, Eastern area, and Northeastern area. And then towards the end of the session, if we have extra time, if you have questions that are not about this area, we certainly can take those as well. So starting here, just to give everyone some orientation, if you're not familiar with all the locations of the county, this yellow line right here that I'm highlighting with my cursor represents portion of the Beltline, 440 Beltline. This triangle right here represents the location of Walnut Creek Elementary School. And over here in the pink, you can also see another triangle that represents the location of Barwell Road Elementary School. This yellow line up here is I-87, 264. I think it has 3 or 4 other digits on it. I write it quite regularly. And then this yellow highlighted area represents Interstate 40 going down toward Benson. Currently, Walnut Creek Elementary has the base attendance area that's shaded in yellow, and Barwell Road has the attendance area that's shaded in this darker pink color. The recommendation is to take this portion that's currently assigned to Barwell Road and assign it to Walnut Creek. Couple of reasons. Barwell Road is experiencing some severe crowding. This area, if you've heard about it in the news recently, it reflects the Old Town subdivision and development area. So a large portion of this area is undeveloped, but is being constructed as we speak. So our recommendation is to take this future growth and go ahead and pre-assign it to Walnut Creek Elementary, where there is available capacity to absorb the growth from this development and to provide some relief to Barwell Road Elementary. The next slide, I'll kind of talk you through how this is set up, and then that way you'll see how it plays out for the future slides. The top table here represents if we did nothing, if we left the assignment areas as they are. You'll see that Barwell Road will see some severe crowding very, very soon, going all the way up to potentially 145% crowding by the 25-26 school year. Walnut Creek will continue to have capacity through that same time period based on its current base assignment area and the current projected development in its existing base attendance area. If we do move forward with the projections, you'll notice that while immediately it doesn't provide a lot of relief, as I mentioned, it's a development that is currently under construction. Over the next couple of years, it will allow some of that growth to be absorbed by the available space that's at Walnut Creek Elementary and provide a margin of relief to Barwell Road. We do need to continue looking at Barwell Road and monitoring it to make sure we're supporting that school appropriately, as it has other areas in its base that are continuing to grow as well. A reminder as we're going through this process, if you have any questions, please put those into the chat. Our host is monitoring that for us so that we can make sure we address those questions as we go. And then also you could use the ThoughtExchange as well. And the ThoughtExchange will just ensure that those questions get fully built into our analysis of all the comments from the public. So it's good to sort of use both. Here with the existing Southeast Raleigh High School. So this particular set of moves actually represents 4 total schools that are involved. The blue shaded area represents the current Broughton High School base attendance area. This sort of pink color represents the current Enloe High School base attendance area. These green shaded areas represent the various portions of the current Southeast Raleigh High School base attendance area. And this sort of yellow mustard color represents a portion of the existing Garner High School base attendance area. We're recommending 2 sets of assignment changes that will move into Southeast Raleigh High School. The first is here. This base attendance area that you see here that's shaded, this sort of hashtag area, represents the current base attendance area for Southeast Raleigh Elementary School. And Southeast Raleigh Elementary School is part of a larger community effort known as Southeast Raleigh Promise. And part of the promise, when the school was originally opened in partnership with Southeast Raleigh Promise and the YMCA, was that over time, these students would also be assigned to Southeast Raleigh High School to continue that full community support system. And since the school's been open for a number of years now, it's time. The students who originally graduated from Southeast Raleigh Elementary are getting old enough to now be ready to move on to high school. And so the recommendation is to take this attendance area, which is largely comprised of existing Broughton base, and this little portion right here that has a little bit of pink in it is actually just a small segment of the existing Enloe base. So recommending taking all of that Southeast Raleigh Elementary base and assigning it to Southeast Raleigh High School. So the resulting map would show that these green areas would now become part of the Southeast Raleigh High School base. There's available capacity at Southeast Raleigh High School to support these students. Broughton is a little bit crowded, so it would provide some relief to Broughton. In addition, we talked about the Old Town subdivision being projected to be assigned to Walnut Creek Elementary. We're also recommending that that same area be added to the Southeast Raleigh High School base attendance area so that all of Walnut Creek Elementary has a continuous feeder pattern into Southeast Raleigh High School. And so with those 2 moves, it takes some students out of Broughton and Enloe and assigns them to Southeast, and it takes no students really, but this undeveloped piece of land from Garner High School into Southeast Raleigh High School. So it's a comprehensive set of moves, and we can kind of look at them individually if we need to. Here you can see the resulting impact. It takes some pressure off of Broughton High School and allows it to not be so crowded. It has a small impact on Enloe High School, keeping in mind that both Broughton, actually all 4 of these schools are part of our magnet program. So any extra available seats that might be there can certainly be supported through magnet applications as well. And here we have each of these maps just at a little bit more fine detail so that you can see them as individual moves. So here you're seeing just the specific details about the recommendation from Garner High School into Southeast Raleigh High School to support that match with Walnut Creek Elementary that we talked about first. And here you see in a little bit more detail that Southeast Raleigh Elementary school-based attendance area that's currently part of Broughton and Enloe, and bringing that into Southeast Raleigh High School. So another move that we're recommending, it's more central, but it's related to the Southeast Raleigh High School piece, because this area right here, if the proposal goes through and this portion of the attendance area for the existing Broughton base is assigned to Southeast, it will free up a little bit of space at Broughton. And there is an attendance area right here, right in the middle of the existing Broughton base attendance area that's currently assigned to Sanderson High School. And so the recommendation would be to bring this particular attendance area into the Broughton High School base, take advantage of those seats that are being opened up if we're able to get that other move approved as well. So the two kind of go together. And as you can see here, that's just the total impact. And it's not a significant impact on Sanderson, but certainly from a proximity standpoint is a good move from that perspective for the existing Sanderson piece. So this move is being recommended largely based on proximity and transportation efficiency. Now we're going to move a little bit east. So to orient you again, the yellow line this time actually represents the 540 interstate piece, with this dark line right here representing Nightdale Boulevard or Business 64. And right up here would be Forestville Road, if you can kind of track my cursor. So for those of you that are familiar with this area, the darker pink area represents the existing Beaver Dam Elementary School base attendance area, and the green represents the existing Forestville Road Elementary base attendance area. The school, Forestville Road, is located right here at the bottom of the attendance area, and then the Beaver Dam site, I think it's actually covered up by our circle here. This area right here, for those of you, again, that are familiar with this region, represents some undeveloped land that's been recently approved for development. A portion of it is the original Wilmar Golf Club, and some other portions of it are some existing, probably farmland is what you would see it as. There is an existing attendance area right here on the northern portion of the recommended area. But recognizing that Beaver Dam is currently a capped school and there is available capacity at Forestville Road Elementary, and this is going to be a high growth area, and all of these attendance areas are east of 540, we're recommending reassigning them from Beaver Dam Elementary to Forestville Road Elementary to take advantage of the available capacity. So this is mostly an operational efficiency move. With Beaver Dam being capped, the long-term goal then would be, if all works out well, potentially we might even be able to recommend some changes to its cap status. No promises yet, but that's sort of the end goal. As you can see, if we leave those attendance areas assigned to Beaver Dam, it will continue to experience crowding over the next several years. And with the available capacity at Forestville, it'll start to fill up with some of the development that's already in its area, but it certainly won't be fully utilized. And so with this recommended set of moves, both schools will have a little bit more of a balance and be able to absorb that new growth that's coming in both of their attendance areas. This is what I refer to as a complementary move. What we showed you before, just 2 slides before, was an elementary school-based attendance area recommendation. And so this would be the complementary middle school-based attendance sort of realignment to get the feeder patterns consistent. So the same attendance area that you see here is actually currently base assigned to River Bend Middle School. And the pink area right here represents Neuse River Middle School. And this blue dot right here in the middle of that circle or oval that's displayed is the actual site of Neuse River Middle. So you can see it's very proximate to the actual school site. So the recommendation from really a balance of facility utilization and for feeder pattern alignment would be to also assign that same attendance area from Riverbend Middle to Neuse River Middle. You'll notice that neither school is particularly crowded today, and what this does is balance both schools out so that they're able to absorb the growth in those two attendance areas that are coming over time, because they're both in high growth areas. Going a little bit more south in this same eastern area, we're now looking at a recommendation from Hodge Road Elementary into Nightdale Elementary. Hodge is represented by the yellow color, its base attendance area, with the school site being located here. Nightdale is represented by this sort of dark blue purple color, with the school site being located here. And the recommendation is to take this portion of the existing Hodge Elementary base and assign it to Nightdale. Couple of reasons for this one. Similar to what we saw earlier, we've got some crowding at Hodge Road Elementary. It is significantly overcrowded, and there's really no relief in sight for it. This yellow line right here represents the existing 540. And again, for those of you that are familiar with this area, this is where 540 ends. And so the continuation of 540 is projected to come along this line. So the recommendation is to take this portion that'll ultimately be somewhat separated from that side and go ahead and assign it to Nightdale. There is available capacity at Nightdale. It'll provide some relief to Hodge Road. And you'll also notice there's another portion down here. I often get questions, well, what about that piece? So two answers to that. One is we certainly don't want to take too many students from Hodge too quickly. We do understand that when you reassign students, it has an impact on the sending school. So this allows for that. And second, with the 540 project continuing down this way, it's a little uncertain as to what might happen with this particular piece of land. And so we just want to be cautious that we are really thoughtful and monitor that from a development perspective to determine what the best recommendation is. It may be best to leave it at Hodge Road, or it may be best to assign it to another area school. So that'll be an area that we're going to continue to look at over the next couple of years. As you can see, the crowding will be reduced somewhat for Hodge Road in that first year, but it really provides some relief in the long run because the growth in the area will then be able to be absorbed by the available capacity at Nightdale. But again, we will need to continue monitoring Hodge over time to make sure that it's able to handle its total population, and again, trying to avoid a cap if we can. So that recommendation, of course, is being made based on available capacity between the two schools. And I believe this is the last recommendation that we have in this particular area that we'll look at. It's related to some undeveloped land, similar to what we saw with Old Town, that's in the Wake Forest area. So the yellowish color that you see here represents the existing Wake Forest Elementary School base attendance area, with the school being located here. And these darker tan areas represent the existing Heritage Elementary School base attendance area, with the school being located here. The portion that we're highlighting is an undeveloped piece of land that from a roadway network system will be continuous with the neighborhoods that are already in place here just above it. And so we're recommending taking that undeveloped land and going ahead and pre-assigning it to Wake Forest Elementary to take advantage of the available capacity at Wake Forest Elementary and to provide ultimately some relief to Heritage Elementary over time. Heritage Elementary is currently a multi-track year-round school, and so just keeping all of that in mind from a capacity perspective, we felt that it would be a better balance between the two schools to be able to have this attendance area assigned to Wake Forest Elementary. As you can see, it balances out the capacity between the two, and there is still some growth in the Heritage Elementary base that we need to be mindful of. And so we'll continue to monitor both of these schools over time. This is a complementary assignment recommendation based on the fact that Wake Forest Elementary is traditional, where Heritage Elementary is year-round. So the recommendation here is just to support a feeder pattern alignment and take that same attendance area and assign it to Wake Forest Middle out of Heritage Middle, so that we can have that feeder pattern alignment for that particular attendance area over time. And again, you can see that it's undeveloped land at this point in time, so the total number of students impacted will not be significant in the short term, but over time it will develop out and have some students that'll support the enrollment at Wake Forest Middle. All right, so that covers the base assignment recommendations that we're making for the Southeast Raleigh area, the Eastern area, and the Northeastern area. Again, if you have your questions, please put those in the chat or in ThoughtExchange so we can make sure we address those before we conclude. I have two more information areas that I want to share with you before we go into our questions. Another portion of our enrollment recommendations or enrollment plan recommendations are the calendar application changes. For those of you that are familiar with this process, if you're at the elementary and middle school level in particular assigned to a traditional calendar, there's often a year-round calendar option that you can request during the magnet and year-round period that comes with district transportation. Similarly, if you're based at a year-round elementary or middle school, there's oftentimes a traditional calendar elementary or middle school that during the transfer period you can request with transportation. With all of the concerns that we have with our existing transportation network and some of the crowding and underutilized schools that we're seeing across the district, we are making some recommendations to change some of those. So what you'll see here is an alphabetical listing of the elementary school recommended changes. The way to read this table is that over here on the left is the name of the base school. So in the let's look at Ballantyne, which I know is not the area that we're talking about here today. But at Ballantyne Elementary, if I'm base assigned to Ballantyne Elementary and I go on my address lookup tool, I might actually see both Fuquay-Varina Elementary and Lincoln Heights Elementary as traditional calendar options. As you can imagine, from a transportation efficiency situation, that does create some challenges. Having multiple buses coming into the same neighborhood to take students to two different traditional calendar schools. So in the case of Ballantyne, we're simply recommending reducing it to a single choice so that those routes can be a little bit more efficient for families that are exercising that choice. In other areas, you might see looking at Carpenter. Currently, they might see Green Hope and Weatherstone, or Weatherstone and White Oak, or something like that. We're recommending that they see one or the other based on where they're located within that attendance area. Again, to try to help our transportation department be able to run a little bit more efficient routes into those communities. You will also notice that some of the recommendations say NA. And what that simply means is it's not that families can no longer request those choices. What it does mean, though, is that we're recommending that transportation no longer be provided to those choices. So the idea would be that if a family really wants that year-round calendar or really wants that traditional calendar, they certainly can still ask for it during the hardship or transfer period that happens in February to March. It's just that if it is approved, we won't be able to provide district transportation to it anymore. And so that's something to think about how this might impact some families and your changes. So here we have a second slide that now looks at those same types of recommendations for Hilburn through Salem elementaries. So the H through S categories. I'll let this one sit for just a moment so that you have a chance to look at it. And do keep in mind the entire presentation that was shared with the board on September 20th, which includes all of these slides and more, is posted to our website. So you're certainly welcome to review that at any time. And we will also post this video so you can pause if you'd like to in the future. And then the last of the elementary school list, starting with Southeast Raleigh Elementary and going through Willow Springs Elementary, the recommended changes here for calendar application options. And then our final slide for calendar application changes includes some middle schools and the one high school, Southeast Raleigh High School, being that it's on a modified year-round calendar. It has historically had a traditional option of Middle Creek High School. And so these would be recommendations, and some of these certainly do impact this area, particularly the Neuse River and the Wendell and the Zebulon. Again, it's not to say that we wouldn't allow families to request these opposite schools. It's just a matter of if we are able to approve those transfers, then they would come without district transportation. We've already talked about the stability rules at the opening, but perhaps it's more important to talk about them now that you've kind of heard what all the changes are. So again, the reminder that because we're not opening any new schools next year, we really thought it would be appropriate to recommend generous stability rules, thinking about the original thought exchange and those focus groups about how important stability of assignment is for a family. While we can't guarantee transportation for all of these approved transfers, we certainly do respect and want to offer families the opportunity to be able to stay at the school that they're at, as well as bring that rising kindergarten, 6th or 9th grade sibling along with them into next year. Once we get a little bit closer and more refined, after draft 2 has been presented to the board, we will start reaching out directly to families to kind of explain to them the physical process of how they would go about requesting that transfer. Keep in mind that the plan is not officially approved until the board votes on it and approves it, which currently is scheduled for November 15th. So let's talk through that timeline. So September 20th was the last time that we shared this with the board. And so it's the same plan that you're seeing here. We're currently sort of shopping it around, doing our public engagement process through the Thought Exchange, as well as through these virtual information sessions. We're gathering feedback and using that feedback to make revisions or any recommended edits to the original draft. And we'll then present a revised draft 2 to the board on October 18th. We'll have one more round of opportunities to respond to that draft. So we'll open up a new thought exchange. The board will have their public hearing on November 10th, and using any information that's collected during that time period, we'll make any final recommendations and present a final draft on November 15th to the board for their consideration and approval. Once the board adopts and officially approves the enrollment plan for 23-24, shortly after that November 15th meeting, we will then directly reach out to actually impacted families and give them very specific instructions on how they can participate in that stability process. After October 18th, we'll do a outreach to families that potentially could be impacted, since we're getting pretty close to a final draft at that point in time, and give them some basic information about, hey, your area is still included in the draft. Your family may be impacted by this. We will reach out to any families that are specifically impacted once the board makes the final approval. So right now we're just generally talking to the entire district. And then over time, we will start reaching out to actual families that are directly impacted by the recommended changes as well, so we can have that targeted outreach. Reminder one last time of all of our remaining information sessions. So if you have friends or neighbors, colleagues, coworkers, anybody who you think might be interested in or be supported by participating in one of our live sessions, please encourage them to join us next week on the 5th or the 6th. Similar to this one, we'll go through a specific series of maps related to that particular targeted area. And then when we get finished with any questions that come up about that area, we can take some time to answer questions about other areas in the county as well. So with that, I'm officially done with my presentation. I appreciate you hanging in there with us. I try to make it engaging and exciting, but I know it can be a little bit long. So just another quick reminder, if you do have any questions or comments that you haven't had a chance to post, please use the ThoughtExchange, preferably using that hashtag session2, so that we know that the comments being posted directly from this session. Or of course, use the chat and we'll address those. And so with that, I'll turn it over to our host to let me know what types of questions might have come in so that we can start addressing any that were posted while I was talking. And then of course, we can address those that come after as well.
We have 2 questions.
Perfect.
The first one is, why not pull all new housing areas into schools that have room for them and leave the existing students where they are? The county is allowing all of this building and the existing students get bounced around. Yes, children can be grandfathered in, but if the entire new areas were assigned elsewhere, transportation can continue for children in the schools that they're currently attending.
And that's an excellent question. And part of it was addressed. I'm not sure if you saw our video. You're right. The district has no say in where the county approves or individual municipalities approve housing developments. And our current permitting processes, I don't know exactly what the right term is for this, don't require that developers set aside land for schools. So you're right. We don't really have a say in all of that. We do get told when they're coming. and so as you can see, there are a couple of areas where we're trying to do exactly that. We were looking at undeveloped land, for example, in the Beaver Dam base attendance area and in the Barwell Road base attendance area. We were identifying undeveloped land and pre-assigning it to a school that had available capacity before families start moving in. And that really is our preferred option. So whenever we can do that, we do. However, when development takes off a little bit faster than expected, or what we're also noticing over the last couple of years is more and more families are opting to stay at their base assigned school. Rough percentages, something on the order of about 70 to 71% of families on average as a district used to attend their base school. Now we're getting closer to a 77% average as a district on the whole. Don't quote me on those. I've got data reports somewhere else that we can share, but we're seeing some different choice patterns for families as well. And so that's changing things for us. So the models that we used to use that were really solid have changed up a little bit over the last couple of years. So on occasion, there is a need to do the reassignments of existing families. It is not our preferred option. And thank you for understanding why we put in the stability rules. Unfortunately, it's not always the option that we have. Being a county-based system, with all the schools that we have, we do sometimes have to assign existing students to existing schools to address the crowding. The option that we've been using that sort of falls in that space right now is the capping model. But the capping model creates very inefficient transportation patterns, and it also breaks communities up because you've got families that live right next door to each other that are being assigned to 2 different schools. So in an effort to try to keep that community cohesiveness, we are trying to find ways to avoid capping or to remove caps when we can as well. So that may not be the answer you were hoping for, but hopefully it explains our thinking.
We have one more question. It's a 2-part question. Does this plan take in consideration the apartments and townhouses that are being built directly across Walnut Creek Elementary? Also, will you consider adding more tracks to Walnut Creek?
So the first question, yes. And that's where you'll notice that some of the growth is coming into Walnut Creek, regardless of whether or not we make the change for the Old Town piece. So yes, all of that is there. As far as adding tracks, that's an excellent question. When the district a couple of years ago started down the road of, hey, maybe we can take a multi-track school and bring it down to a single track, that was intentional so that in the event that more growth came, we could easily add more tracks so that the capacity of the school could be expanded. Those conversations usually come a little bit later. So what we start first with is what is going to be the assignment plan. Then we use that with what we know about application processes. And usually around February, we'll come back to the board with additional conversations about things such as caps, removing caps, or even potentially adding or removing tracks for schools that are experiencing either growth or are becoming smaller.
That is it so far.
Well, since there's a little bit of a pause, there's another question that's come up on the Thought Exchange quite a lot. Why not move them? Why move us? Kind of thing. And hopefully my discussion about the capital improvement plan helps a little bit with that. In this particular region of the county, there aren't any new schools scheduled to open in the near term. And so that's part of why we're making the recommendations that we are. We know there's not a new school coming to provide any additional relief. So we know we need to make some sort of a recommendation to provide some balance for these schools. In other parts of the county, we are aware that there are some new schools that are getting ready to open in the coming years. And so as a result, recommendations we're making there are based on leaving those spaces that are most likely going to be impacted by the opening of the new schools where they are for the time being, recognizing that in 2 or 3 years, we might be coming back to those areas and recommending they be assigned to the new schools. So that's usually why it's why us and not them. That can sometimes answer that question as well. I feel like we've addressed questions for the region. Does anybody have any questions about other parts of the county or other parts of the plan that we didn't specifically discuss today?
Let us know in the chat.
And also, as I mentioned earlier, the Thought Exchange in particular will stay open till October 7th. So if you have that aha moment, later on this evening or sometime tomorrow, or you're talking with someone and go, oh, I should have said something about that, please put that into the Thought Exchange. We do review that very frequently, multiple times a day. And then, of course, we'll do a deep analysis of all of the thoughts that have been posted after we close it on October 7th, so we can make sure we have a really good understanding of the perspective of families and parents and share that with the board as well.
We will ask for final questions. If you don't have any final questions, this is the end of our session, but we'll stay on for a few more minutes in case anybody has one more question. Oh, I found another one. Can you show the graph for Southeast Raleigh High School again?
Yes, if everyone will close your eyes. No, actually, what I'll do, I'll stop sharing. I'll find the slide and then I'll reshare so I don't make everybody dizzy.
And for the person who asked that, we also have the whole PowerPoint posted on our website, wcpss.net/22, I'm sorry, wcpss.net/2023 enrollment proposal. The entire presentation is there if you want to look at the map later.
And we can drop that in the chat as well so that person can have a direct link, right?
Yes.
Perfect. So this was the attendance area recommendations. Just this was the visual. I believe you asked about the numbers. And so this was the slide that showed the distribution. As you can see, Broughton and Enloe are a little bit over enrolled, projected to be over enrolled next year. We have some available capacity in both Garner and Southeast Raleigh. And so what this does is it immediately gives a little bit of an uptick to Southeast Raleigh while providing some relief to Broughton. And then over time, it provides a little bit of a balance between the 4 schools. Garner has some growth that's coming and a little bit later with the opening of South Garner High School that has relieved its immediate crowding concerns almost too well. And there's so we've got some more growth coming in both the South Garner and Garner areas that'll be absorbed over time with the capacity that's available between those 2 schools. And again, all 4 of these schools are part of our magnet programs, so any additional available capacity that might be available at these schools can be used to support the magnet program as well.
Let us know if you have any final questions after this. I will end the recording and then I will post it in the morning on the wcpss.net/2023 enrollment proposal website in case you want to look back. But please let us know if you have any other questions. Ms. Pulliam, I think that might be it.
Okay. Well, we appreciate all of you joining us today. We know it's carving out time in your personal time and maybe your storm preparation. So please, everyone, be safe tomorrow. And we look forward to engaging with you again in future public information sessions and other public engagement activities. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Good night.